All right. Well, good morning. I had to have a little bit of special prayer for our meeting this morning as we started, which you guys just heard. And that's because when you're going to talk about a secular movie on a Sunday morning, we have to pray that we make sure we bring God's perspective to it, right? Otherwise, this would be it wouldn't be worthwhile. It would not be worth our time. I was surprised. I did not want to watch the movie Barbie. Silas twisted my arm. And as you can see, he's fairly persuasive when he twists somebody's arm. And he's like, "No, I really want to watch this." So we sat down and we watched it. And we had a really good conversation afterwards, Soph and Silas and I. And I thought, oh man, this brings up so many issues. This might be fun to do with everybody else. So I don't know, did everybody watch this thing? Did you guys watch this? No? You spared yourselves from, okay. Okay. Hopefully you can still appreciate the discussion this morning. I found watching the Barbie movie refreshing in several ways. It took shots at basically all things, right? Like it targeted, no one was safe, right? Everyone was targeted and everyone was hit by Barbie. It made points about all perspectives and demonstrated, the extremes of each perspective that were unreasonable. And I thought that was its strength, right? Was to hold out there for us some of the extremes and the unreasonableness of different competing perspectives. I mean, a couple of things that come to mind is, there's this wonderful quote where Barbie says, "Thanks to Barbie, all things of feminism and equal rights have been solved." And I think there's a follow-up statement of, why would Barbie's talking about the person in the real world that she's related with who's become sad, and she says, well, why would she be sad? We fix things in the real world so that women are always happy and powerful. Barbie fixed things in the real world so that women are always happy and powerful. Didn't you know that, right? Like, isn't that just true? Right? Isn't this something we can just be like, yes, amen, they did. But in reality, when Barbie steps into reality, we see some of these extremes. There's an extreme of a representation of what I think modern society would call like male sexual aggression. Barbie's rollerblading, right? And she's being oogled and everybody's looking at her and she's like, whoa, I don't really feel safe here, And she's like, and they're catcalling and they're saying all these things to her. That's a very extreme representation of that, right? Like, I don't think normally people are going to be that aggressive in saying things to someone who's rollerblading, even if she was dressed in hot pink and hot yellow and all hot blue and everything else. The construction site, it may happen, yes. But it was.
I've worked as an only female in like a male-dominated industry at Dairy Gold, and it's bad.
And it's bad. Yeah, absolutely. And so, like you kind of have that extreme, but then the construction workers are definitely, and so it's not like it doesn't have a basis in reality. It does have a basis in reality, unfortunately, but they kind of demonstrate it in an extreme manner. But it does have some basis. But you brought up the construction site. The funny thing is Barbie represents kind of this other extreme, which is this idea of what I would call modern feminism. And so she says, oh, there's a construction site over there, and they're on lunch break. And Barbie says, we need that good feminine energy. So she goes toward the construction site expecting to see what? Women in those jobs, right? Because that would be the ideal of feminism, right? That women occupy all positions that men occupy, and they do it as well as, if not better than men, right? Yeah. And so she approaches the construction site, but what does she find? Just a bunch of guys who then go right into their, double intenders, I think is entendres that are double entendres, entendre, double entendre. Yes, great. That was one thing I appreciated about the movie. Really great vocabulary, really well written throughout, and so they say what they say to her. But again, it's like, isn't that the movie taking a little bit of shot at that feministic perspective of women should be in all places, in all societies, doing all jobs, doing everything that men would be doing? I think that's fascinating.
Well, they're kind of making fun of it in Barbie world, like the Barbie president. And Barbie,
yeah.
Every role of power is occupied by Barbie in the Barbie world.
And so in Barbie Land, you have that opposite, and that's going to bring up some interesting things about juxtaposing those things as well. A couple other quotes that came to mind that I think just strike at different folks. This was one that I think was quite controversial, and I hesitate to actually quote the quote. But speaking of the construction site, Ken says to the construction guys, "I have all the genitals."
Right.
Because he doesn't know, right? He doesn't know about male and female reproductive systems. No, he doesn't know. It's clear he doesn't know. He has no concept of that. Barbie does, but Ken doesn't. And so in his ignorance, he's like joking, he's kind of like trying to show himself a macho guy, right? And he's like, so I have all the, because he doesn't know what he's talking about. But think about that in the discussions that we've been having as of late. Dad, what were you going to say?
How do you know the Barbie knows?
Well, because she says to the construction workers, I don't have a female reproductive organs, and he doesn't have male reproductive organs, in not so many words, in other words, but that's what she says.
Why she knows it and Ken doesn't, I don't understand.
Well, because she's educated. She's in Barbie Land. The Kens aren't educated in Barbie Land. The Kens just beach.
He does
And
to the lady in the real world too, like she was learning about.
well, that's true.
Suicide.
Yeah, maybe that was part of it, that connection. But the point is think about that statement in the present conversation about men can be women and women can be men and we can transfer back and forth. And because he looks so silly saying what he says, right? He just shows his ignorance. And we laugh at that. But out in the world, there's this lie being propagated that men can change and be women, women can change and be men. And we're not supposed to laugh at that, right? We're not supposed to treat that as if it's ignorant, and yet it is. It's terrible. A couple other quotes before we... the male CEO of Mattel saying in the idea room, when you think of sparkle, what do you think of next? And what was his answer? Female agency. Yes, female agency. That was hilarious. Showing some of the ridiculousness of things. Another guy from the Mattel group says, I'm a man with no power. Does that make me a woman? You remember that? Because Barbie's looking for a woman in the group of executives, right, in Mattel, and so he pops up. I'm a man with no power. Does that make me a woman? So, it just strikes at all things. The Barbie movie brings up these kinds of things, and that's why I thought it was fun to think about it. What they don't do in the Barbie movie is demonstrate a godly perspective. They don't put any sense of God's worldview on display. They just kind of, poke fun at a lot of different worldviews. But God's isn't ever portrayed, except maybe at certain little moments. Or I wouldn't say God's, but just truth itself is portrayed at certain moments. How does the real world receive Barbie? How does she affect girls. I think the opening scene is actually just amazing. You guys remember the opening scene? Yes.
Girl that she's like going to talk to and stuff. The girl's like, I don't like you. I hate you.
Yes.
We just
Yes.
feel bad about ourselves.
Because here's this supposed feminine ideal that just makes real women feel bad about themselves. Yeah. Yeah. But that's not the opening scene, but yes. Yeah. What's the opening scene?
Oh, right.
Yes. The little girls all sitting around playing with their dolls, right? And then Barbie appears and they get angry, right? And they take those dolls and they just smash them and break them. And they're like, I don't want anything to do with this little dumb doll anymore. I want that, you know? And all of a sudden, there's this unhappiness, this dissatisfied. And yeah, Carolyn, like you were saying, the daughter Sasha,
Yeah,
later on just kind of destroys Barbie, right, in front of her friends, and is like, you put this unattainable ideal out there and represent capitalism and I don't know, some other oppression and something else, and she calls her she calls Barbie a fascist. Yeah. And so that's more. Ladies, do you relate with that? Like, is Barbie just this really dumb capitalistic idea that is a bad thing? Like, is it? Like, I think, yeah.
I think it just she just represents what culture already puts on.
Ah,
It's not her. It's
yeah.
I do feel
Go ahead.
everything in the kids' toy world and like things marketed to children there's always this like perverse incentive to be like selling things. So like
Sure.
I think there's probably some sort of like collaboration between Barbie and other toys and clothing manufacturers and other things to like they're trying to sell
They're
product.
trying to sell product. Yeah, absolutely.
Whatever she represents is whatever's going to maximize that. Like
Certainly. It leads me to another question, though. Which of the characters, with which of the characters did you identify? Which did you really say, okay, I can kind of relate with this person? Alan? He's like the most real person in Barbie Land, isn't he? He's kind of sees through, he kind of doesn't exist in either of the Ken or the Barbie world. He's sort of in between. Yeah. You definitely identify with Ken? You identify with the beach lifestyle?
who identifies with weird Barbie?
Yeah. Weird Barbie. What a great character, right? Like,
I really liked her.
yeah.
First I was kind of like, what?
Yeah.
I think it was hard to find a good male role model character that you could really. I mean, Ken is just infatuated with Barbie. That's sort of the world around, but there just was not a good solid. I didn't know character to really respect and admire.
There wasn't really, was there? Alan's the closest thing to it, oddly enough. He, what, yeah, yeah.
I was wearing a pink jumpsuit. I wasn't sure.
Well, they're trying to get an Oscar. They're not allowed to have strong male characters in the Academy. So.
So Silas is saying he identifies with Ken.
Tell me why.
Blows around in the wind.
Just wants to take her apart. And she just won't let it.
He'll change his whole self for Barbie. Not a fan of Ken.
Dad said there's not any real. Dad said there's no good kind of male character to kind of look to in this movie. That I thought was, I really appreciate that. There is a dad in this movie. What kind of a character is he?
He only speaks Spanish.
He tries.
He attempts to speak Spanish.
He attempts to speak Spanish. Why? Why is he trying to speak Spanish?
To relate.
To connect with his Hispanic wife and daughter, who both speak Spanish. And so the only time you see this guy is him sitting at home trying to, use the Spanish American dictionary, right? English dictionary, and trying to learn this. And then one other time in the car with them. And what does the daughter say and the mom say as they're entering into Barbie land, right? The daughter's like, "Well, what about dad?" And the mom's like, "He'll be fine." It's just like completely dismissed character. Purposefully so, completely dismissed character. I mean, that's not on accident, right? Like, this is written into the script. This is the way they want it to be. And so, and you see him try to relate to his wife and daughter, and he kind of fails, right? He's just sort of bumbling along. And so, yeah, that was the one character that could have been maybe a decent male character, but they just completely dismissed him. Yeah.
Well, he wasn't just bumbling along. He was really trying to relate to them in their language, and yet they found fault with him every
Right.
time he opened his mouth.
Right.
And I think that was evident to me that they made fun of him.
It was,
Trying
yes.
to do it. So he was trying to do good, he was trying to relate, and all he got was being made fun of.
This is interesting because he was trying to do good, I guess, but you don't see him in his occupation. You don't see him as a provider. You don't see him as a bringer of security or safety. You don't see him as anything other than just only trying to relate to them on their level, and that's kind of rejected. He's kind of failing, and
He was Kenny.
yes, thank you. I think that's said well. He was kenning pretty hard, and yeah, and rejected like Ken was rejected, which is fascinating.
Follow-up question.
Yeah,
Are there any good female characters in this movie?
great question. Well, we haven't heard yet, ladies. I think there's probably some other characters that you may identify with.
I can relate to the mom a real lot.
Okay, yes.
Her rant where she's like trying to encourage all the Barbies out of their.
Right. I was like, that was like the one thing of substance.
Yeah.
Ah, yes, yes. I know you did, Mom. Yeah.
But also, I feel like the teenage daughter is like just being so upset with the system the way it is. Not that she had like good thoughts about how it should be, but just like bucking against it in some ways. Not like the stereotypes that Barbie did convey.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that the movie is really about the mom? It kind of really is, isn't it?
Yeah.
She has the best moments, I think, in the movie of kind of expressing, like Anna's talking about, this angst, this like,
Characters in front of Barbie.
oh yeah, oh,
In competition for the lead character.
abs-
The mom
abs- and Ken. I think so as well. It's funny that Silas says Ken. I honestly can see, I can relate with Ken a little bit in that he struggles so much in Barbie land because he's his whole, and he says it, he's like, I was created for you. And this is what's fascinating about what the Barbie movie does. It can take some of these normal, not normal, but these belief systems and flip them around, and then it exposes something about them that's interesting, right? Ken says to Barbie, I was created for you. I only exist in the warmth of your gaze. Like that's one of his quotes, right? And so, is this the writers taking shot at the Genesis story? that Eve was only created because of Adam, and that she only exists because of him? Are they trying to, kind of take a shot at that? Maybe. I don't know. You could certainly say in history and in societies, even today around the world, women are not treated with the proper value and esteem that they ought to be. And they've suffered a lot at the hands of male abuse. And so that's a reality. That's something that is necessary to be acknowledged. But I really do think it kind of lands. So, okay, let me finish my thought. However, in the United States today, things do seem to have shifted. And it's funny how much Ken kind of struggles in Barbie land. And then when he gets to the real world, he's kind of like comes into his own, right? And he's like, wow, patriarchy. What is this thing, And he realizes there's this different way of doing things. And someone asks him the time. And he says, wow, you respect me? Like just because they asked him the time. And called him sir, yeah. Or like, excuse me. And he's like, well, yeah. Like he was noticed. He was seen. Very interesting, the way that's portrayed. Not in the, well, he does actually. I mean, not in the real world. No. Yeah, he's trying to figure it out. And he represents, in the real world, he represents, again, that extreme, like, terrible perspective of women can only be certain things and not others, and he's like, goes into the medical community.
Right.
And there's a doctor there who's a woman. And he's like, I need to speak with a doctor. And she's like, I am a doctor. And he's like, no, you're not. Where's the real doctor? Can you get me some coffee? And it's just this horrible, stereotypical, just terrible. So, again, it just pokes fun at all kinds of things. But in a world where men are told, you're not really necessary to take care of women, because women can take care of themselves. And women can do all the things. They be moms, they can be career people, they can do this, they can do that, they can do this other thing. That tells men, well, I'm not really needed in certain ways like I might think I am, or I might want to be needed. But it also tells women, you have to do for yourself all of these things in order to be empowered, in order to be independent, in order to be self-actualized, right? In order to not be oppressed. And so you've got this two-part difficulty, because both groups, both men and women, are being told, you got to do it this way, or you got to do it that way. And you can't do it in relationship or in reliance upon each other. And that's what I think really, where Barbie really comes into that very worldly perspective, and it falls flat because it lacks that godly perspective. In Barbie land, the Barbies do everything. They occupy all the professional roles. They are the presidents, they are the Supreme Court, they are the legislators, they are the business owners, they are everything, right? They are the professionals, they are everything. And the Kens, Barbie doesn't even know where Ken lives. Nobody knows where the Kens live. She doesn't know. It's like they're homeless dudes sleeping on the beach. And all the Barbies have their own houses and everything else. Very, very interesting. And then, of course, Ken comes back and patriarchy takes over. And you guys remember, and so then the Kens rule for a little while. You remember, though, what Ken said and what Ken did to take over with patriarchy? Do you remember the mechanism where he overthrew the matriarchy of Barbie land and took it over with patriarchy? You remember what it was? I think he says, well, I just explained patriarchy to them. and
Oh, right, yeah.
and they got it, and it clicked or something like that.
Right.
That made me think of a couple of things. I had a class in college called Women, Power, and Politics. It was a poli-sci class, and we read a novel called Herland, where women ruled, and they figured out that they could reproduce without men, and so, but these guys happen upon this little secluded island that is Herland, and it's a very progressive, like idealistic world. They're all vegetarians. All the women share in the raising of the children. Like it's a kind of cooperative effort, and there are no real men to speak of. And fascinating little novel. But point is Women, Power, and Politics. That class, the whole point of it was just to kind of challenge the political structures of modern society, specifically between men and women. Now, I also learned some very interesting things. I learned about some oppression that happens over in Africa and in the Middle East, of Islam predominantly, and what they practice against women that is horrible. The mutilation that happens, and some very, very bad things. And so it was good in that regard, but it also was kind of like a microcosm of, if we say these certain things, it'll wake things up in people. And I saw that on the university all the time, where it's almost like Barbie appearing, and the girls get very dissatisfied with their dolls and they break them. It's like the world that you exist in growing up gets shattered when you go to university, and the things that you would be content in get destroyed. Content in being a mother and feeling like that's enough. Content in being just who you are. And I find that's kind of what's at play in Barbie as well. And the flip side of that, again, they kind of go both ways, but the flip side is what Meryl was just talking about. The mom, Gloria, how does she flip them out of patriarchy back to the way that they were? The Barbies. She tells them the reality of the modern woman's plight, right? She explains the difficulties of, you've got to be thin but not too thin, and you've got to be attractive but not too attractive, and you've got to be, a professional, but you can't be bossy. You've got to lead, but you can't diminish other people's ideas, or, other people have to be appreciated, and you have to do this and you have to do that. And yeah, okay. And so, but that was the cure for the Barbies, right? To get them back to normal, so to speak. What's that? Remind them of suffering. Okay. Yeah. Remind them what reality is. The thing that I don't like, though, about the dichotomy is there's the patriarchy that Ken perceives, and then there's the matriarchy that is Barbie land, right? And it's always these two things pitted against each other. There's never a representation of a cooperative effort. In fact, how do the Barbies take back over Barbie land? They turn the Kens against each other. By what mechanism? Jealousy. Yes, by jealousy. They turn the men against them through jealousy. And so now the men are fighting each other, and that allows the Barbies to take over. You know what that is, guys? What is that? That is a communistic takeover. You guys know that, right? That's exactly what happens. What you do is you make people dissatisfied and uncomfortable with their whatever in life, and tell them they're being oppressed, and tell them they don't have what they should have, and you frame everything in a power discussion about power, and then while they're fighting each other because they're ticked because I don't have what you have, and you don't think you have enough of this and that, while we're fighting each other, somebody else takes over, right? And the dictator comes in and takes over. That is exactly how communist takeovers happen, and it's trying to be done in our society today, very aggressively. They're making every conversation about power and about power disparity, and thereby making people unsatisfied, unhappy, and looking at each other like, I have to compete with you for power, and I have to compete with you for power, and that group, and this group, and this group. And now we're divided, and now it's gonna create a power vacuum, and someone will come in and will take over. And that's exactly what they want. And you know what they do here that's so sad? Is they do it in the home. And they put a partnership of male-female, husband-wife partnership against each other. And they pit each other, and they pit the woman and the man against each other. And how do they do it? By saying there's a power disparity. The man seems to have all the power, and the woman doesn't. And so homes are being destroyed because of that philosophy. Now think about it, though. Who really has the power? How is power measured in Barbie?
Who's in control and who owns it?
Who owns things and who's in control? Okay? Well, what do we mean who's in control? What does that mean more specifically? Yep, occupying positions, yep.
Yeah, and then has access to the dream houses.
Has access to the dream houses, yeah. But political power, professional power, those kinds of things. That's how power is measured, right? And remember what the narrator said toward the end? Kens will be given as much power in Barbie land as women have in the real world. Remember that quote? Because remember the Kens at the end are like, well, could we at least have a little bit of, like maybe a seat on the Supreme Court? And she's like, maybe we'll make you can't be on the Supreme Court, but we'll create another job for you. And the Kens are like, yes, thank you. And and then the narrator comes in. Okay, that's their definition of power. There's a power disparity if more of one sex occupies the Supreme Court than the other, right? This is the way that they frame the conversation. Do you guys accept that? Do you accept that definition of power? Is that accurate?
All the guys say no, but I have to say this, in that the women did not have very many rights prior to women's suffrage. Prior to, as far as in America, but I think also in England, and if you it was run by men, and because men don't experience what women experience, and don't struggle with what women struggle, they don't have any idea to, quote, help with or protect that. And so until women started speaking up on some of these things and demanding something, there was not the ability, like in a divorce, women lost everything. And I've seen that happen in my lifetime. The men got the children a lot of times. And if the woman didn't meet a certain criteria with how much she made, and so there was, the woman left, she had to leave the house and all that stuff.
Okay, you're right. What you're talking about are facts and realities of life. What I'm asking is, do you accept the definition of power that there is a disparity if one sex occupies more governmental positions than the other? Is that a reflection of a disparity of power that needs to be equalized?
Well, you're adding that needs to be equalized to the end. I actually do agree that is a representation of power.
Okay. Okay.
If it's mostly men in political offices that control the militaries and things,
Right.
coupled with men being on average physically stronger.
Right.
Like, yeah, pretty obviously men have more power in our society.
Okay, then that would be, okay. Is it something that needs to be equalized?
Is that really power, or is that innate ability and just that guys are better suited to do certain things, gals are better suited to do other things?
You're arguing about the why or whether it's good or bad.
Well, but
I'm saying just like a matter of fact.
Just matter of fact that it is, and that's fair, but now I guess the follow-up question is, does it need to be equalized? Marcia, you were going to say something.
Well, I think as far as our position as mothers go, though, we can have an amazing influence on the next generation. Maybe the
Marcia, you're still in my thunder.
back here, we can't.
Yeah, go ahead. Let me say it. She said mothers have an amazing amount of influence on the next generation. They have a position of influence that is really, really powerful. She's still in my thunder. Good job.
Instead of fostering an appreciation for what it is that women already do and are best at, there's been seeds of dissonance sown to create that strife and that separation.
Absolutely. And how have they done that? They've diminished the value of what women naturally bring to the table. That's what's happened. And if we would value it appropriately, I don't think we would have that power vacuum and that problem. Think about it, guys. We were looking at Ruth last time we met. I want you to think about Ruth for a moment, and I'm going to give you just a couple verses of Ruth. Think about the story of Ruth from the perspective of Barbie. Okay? How would you read Ruth, and what would you think about this story if you're looking at it through the lens of Barbie land? What would you see? Could you see anything other than just a power disparity between the sexes? I mean, chapter 1, Naomi says to her 2 daughters, verse 8, "Go, return each to her mother's house. The Lord deal kindly with you as ye have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant you that you may find rest, each of you in the house of her husband." Then she kissed them, and they lift up their voice and wept. She says, listen, go back to your mother's houses, find husbands, find rest for yourself there. Is this the only thing that they can aspire to? To go find husbands? Can they not go find a career in the professional world? Perhaps culturally in this? No. Okay. Is this all that they have to offer? Chapter 2, verse 2. Where do we find Ruth? "And Ruth the Moabitess said unto Naomi, Let me go now to the field and glean ears of corn after him, in whose sight I shall find grace. And she said unto her, Go, my daughter." You know what gleaning is? Picking up the scraps. Yep. Picking up the scraps behind the harvesters. Doesn't sound like she has very much power and influence in society. She's gleaning. Okay. Is there no opportunity for her to have any more significant role in the community? Verse 5. "Then said Boaz unto his servant that was set over the reapers, Whose damsel is this?" If I'm putting on my women power and politics hat and I read that statement, I'm offended for her sake. What does that mean? Whose damsel is this? She doesn't have, exactly, she doesn't have self-agency, self-ownership. We have to frame the question in whose possession is this person? Who's responsible for her? It's interesting. Naomi tells Ruth, "I want to seek rest for you," in chapter 3. She obviously is talking about seeking a husband for her.
Well, what does that rest entail?
Well, hopefully it means she's taken care of,
Yeah,
right?
she doesn't have to try and earn everything herself.
Right.
To
Right.
She has rest. She doesn't have to work all day long, every day.
Right. That's not a bad thing, is it? No, but the women power in politics hat says, well, she should be allowed to, go out and do these things. It's the culture that's the problem. It's that cultural, mess that they're living in. It's that disparity between the powers of the two sexes. That's the problem. Well, let's get to chapter 4 and let's see. Chapter 4, Boaz says he's going to buy a piece of ground from Naomi, but then he at the same time says he's going to buy it really of Elimelech and of Elimelech's children. He says that in verse 5, he acknowledges that they need to buy the field from the hand of Naomi. But you also have to buy it from Ruth, he says, the wife of the dead, to raise up the name of the dead upon his inheritance. And it's at this point that the kinsman says, no, I won't do that. It'll mar my own inheritance. But then, verse 9, and Boaz said to the elders and unto the people, ye are witnesses this day that I have bought all that was Elimelech's and all that was Chilion's and Mahlon's of the hand of Naomi. So it's really the guys who possess the land, right? But he's saying, I'm buying it of Naomi, but it's really the guys that own it. Moreover, Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of Mahlon, have I purchased to be my wife. Now here again, women power in politics at. What, she's just something to own? She's just a possession? But let's get to it. Let's get to the good part. Verse 11. And all the people that were in the gate and the elders said, we are witnesses. The Lord make the woman that is come into thine house like Rachel and like Leah, which two did build the house of Israel. And do thou worthily in Ephratah, and be famous in Bethlehem. Let thy house be like the house of Pharez, whose Tamar bare unto Judah, and the seed for which the Lord shall give thee of this young woman. Is there a little bit of honor, a little bit of regard for some women and what they've done? Notice what they just said. Who two did build the house of Israel. Rachel and Leah built the house of Israel. Guys, I think that's a wonderful statement of honor, of regard, of acknowledging an amazing contribution, an amazing accomplishment, building the house of Israel. I think of my wife and what she gave me. These 4 children. 3 young men and a daughter. And she trained them, she educated them, she built that house of her own body. She's building the household of the Lord with sons and daughters in the faith. What more amazing contribution can there be? What more powerful seat of influence can there be than to influence that next generation and raise them up in the truth of the Lord? I can't think of one. But the commies would have us looking at each other going, well, you're more powerful than me, and I don't have as much power as you. And dividing and not appreciating those things.
Well, they appreciate it. They just want everybody in school so they can raise the next generation. They know exactly.
They don't appreciate
They don't
the natural role of the family and the natural role of husband and wife. They don't appreciate that. They want to destroy it so they can take that influence for themselves. You're exactly right.
They preach autonomy, but what they actually create is the opposite.
Yes. You end up being a servant to things that you shouldn't have to be. Silas.
So this kind of demonstrates the problem with the movie, is that they try to demonstrate that it's really bad for the Kens to be in their situation because they're not in any positions of power. All they do is beach, like they don't know how to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
Like in his song, he sings about how he's really great at doing
Stuff.
he doesn't have anything to do.
Right.
And it's like they compare that and show how bad it is for the Kens to the patriarchy, so to speak, in the real world. But Ken is still a man in Barbie Land and cannot do any of the things a woman can do as far as bearing and raising children.
Mm-hmm.
And so he actually has nothing.
He actually has, yeah, just his good looks and, charm. That's really it.
It's like you can't compare those two things because Ken is still a man who doesn't have anything to do.
You're right. And that's why he struggles so much. Yes. Dad?
Let me ask you a question. We're at a really crazy place in our society where now we have men who become trans women competing in women's sports. And it's like we have men who say they can be better women than the women can be. I'm wondering why feminists don't stand up and get really, really mad about this.
Some of them do.
Martina Navratilova does,
Yeah.
and there are a few sports people who stand up against it.
I'm going to come back to that, Dad.
Okay.
I'm going to get there. We were talking about this movie with some friends at a marriage, at a wedding reception that we went to. And Elizabeth, she's the assistant coach for the team. Great, bright, young Christian lady. She said, we were talking about it, and she goes, well, I know that like in Christianity, I know that the wife is supposed to serve the husband. And she was kind of saying, like I acknowledge that's the way God sets it up. But she was saying, but there's also sometimes like, women get kind of, I don't know, she was trying to, she was just kind of wrestling with the concept. And I stopped her and I said, okay, hold on. So you're saying the wife's supposed to serve the husband. I said, let me paint a picture for you and tell me who's serving who. One person's expected to produce, to work, to provide, to go outside of the home, to accomplish, to take on the challenges of the world, to bring back something of value that provides and sustains. Another one is not expected to have to do that. In fact, that other one can be at home, can be doing things in the home, managing it, doing other things, and doesn't have to and is not expected to do that. Who's serving who? In war times, one is expected to go out and fight the battle. One is not. Who's serving who? Elizabeth, I think, is affected by our modern conversation around this topic. She sees it one way. Women are supposed to serve, the wives are supposed to serve their husbands. She sees it from that dynamic and that dynamic only. Well, God says to a husband, you're to self-sacrifice for your wife, as Christ did for the church. Who's serving who?
I mean, both, but definitely in the
Thank you.
instances you're
It's
mentioning, the
both.
man is serving both.
But the point is, you have to argue from the other side for a moment before Elizabeth acknowledges it's both. It's not just the one. Addie.
I also had a friend who kind of pointed out something really interesting that a lot of people don't think about a lot because we were talking about the roles of men and women.
Mm-hmm.
It was well, nobody thinks about when a husband is always held accountable. If something happens as a kid, and the husband is held accountable and all that kind of stuff. If you don't build a firm foundation for your house, you're gonna be held accountable. So it's he's pointing out how all the pressure is on the men and then the women are interesting thought.
It is an interesting thought. What came out of that conversation was Elizabeth saying, women secretly rule the world.
Slightly rule the world.
And then she kept saying women slightly rule the world. No, women secretly rule the world. And this is actually supported by all kinds of good literature. The Iliad, that whole fight, that whole epic battle is all over a woman. Okay? Same thing with so many other stories. In fact, we've got Bible stories about this. When Dinah, the sister to the 12 brothers, is defiled, what happens? Those brothers go in and they kill every male in that city. They kill every single dude in that city.
Well, that's just objectifying women.
That possessions. Benjamin, they get destroyed. This is the basis for 7 brides for 7 brothers. Judges chapter 21. What happens? The few remaining men of Benjamin go in and steal the women who are out dancing and take them for wives. Funny story. Noah describes the story of Rome being built and forming alliances. And it was based on the men from Rome going out and stealing women from other towns, and then those towns coming to wage war against the Romans, and the women come out and say, don't fight. It's okay. They're going to make us their wives. We're going to have husbands. We're going to be fine. It's okay. And instead, what happens is they form alliances with these other cities because of this.
Do you advocate this behavior today?
No. What I'm saying is men are willing to go to very big extremes in their seeking of a wife and in their protection of. And they are willing to go out and put their lives on the line in battle to do so. And this is not it's seldom brought into the modern discussion about feminism versus whatever, I don't know. God's perspective, I don't know. But let me get to a couple other profound statements because I think this is where the movie really lands well. The mom, I think, is the person that we really are supposed to relate to. And I think the movie does a great job of demonstrating the conundrum of her life, even though it doesn't resolve it. She has a quote saying, "I'm just a boring mom with a boring job and a daughter who hates me." I was talking to Laura about this, and she's like, "Yeah, I relate. And there's times, in that teenage daughter versus mother relationship where it can be pretty strained. And Laura was just acknowledging that. There's another statement by the daughter. The daughter says, everyone hates women. Men hate women. Women hate women. It's the one thing we can all agree on. What a statement. What a statement. Why is that? Why is she saying that?
True.
But is it true in Ruth's story? I don't think so. It's true today.
Is it so competitive?
Because it's competitive. Because we see each other as adversaries, competing for power and influence, when we shouldn't be.
Well, and I think this is the one thing that feminism did was try to unite women together instead of being cats and have their claws out all the time. Because, don't you steal my man, or don't you look so good that you
Mm-hmm.
everybody else's head and this stuff going on amongst women, because that's what we are afraid of, and that's where we're vulnerable. That's the one thing that,
In an ungodly world, we're all vulnerable.
yeah. Well, and the men, remember how the men were jealous of each other?
Exactly, yeah.
Then what happened? They started working together, and they did their little dance and everything, and they started becoming friends. And it showed women working together and men working together at the end, but it never
It never shows. the men and women coming together. And I have interdependence in my definitions because this is the relationship that I think we're supposed to have, right? We're supposed to have interdependence, a mutual dependence, a dependence upon each other. That's what God instituted. You know, and that's what's really sad at the end of the movie is you get to the place where you're like, okay, maybe it's going to resolve in kind of a neat way, and it doesn't. It resolves kind of disappointing and terrible, doesn't it? Because you think, oh, maybe they'll actually see each other and work together. And no, we don't get that at all. In fact, we get this weird thing about becoming real. And, you know, and to me, the whole thing just falls really, really flat. But consider this. Yes, Silas?
I was gonna say there's a reason that it happens that way. That's because Barbie is actually the ideal of Barbie, and she basically is the independent, woman who just does, work and stuff.
Yes.
And she doesn't want to be that. She wants to go to the real world to be a real woman.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily that she doesn't want to, be with a man or anything. She just wants to be real instead of just this idea.
True. She does want to be real, not just an idea. She says she wants to be the one imagining, not the one imagined.
Exactly.
Great statement. But when you get back to the real world and you see a guy who's in that position of being a husband and father, it's her husband, and he's lame. He's a schmuck. And so, again, it doesn't ever really demonstrate that kind of good cooperative when it could have. It purposely discounts it. And in fact, another very interesting quote is Ken's desire for Barbie to be his long-term, low-commitment, distance girlfriend. This is the problem, right? In modern feminism, with women not supposed to being dependent upon a man to, whatever, and not really expecting to be committed to by a man, what they end up being is just that, a long-term, low-commitment, distance girlfriend who takes care of herself, works for herself, and does all those things. And this was a lot of what Sophia and Silas and I were talking about because of this terrible reality that comes from that. I don't see Barbie entering into anything but that in the real world. Me, personally, as she walks into it, based on what the movie portrays. I don't see it. But let's get to the point of her becoming real, because I think this is really where the godlessness of the movie is portrayed as well. What is it that makes Barbie real? What does it mean to be real in this movie? Feelings. Why do you say that?
Wants to feel all the things. When she goes into the real world the first time, she cries for the first time, and she's like, "Oh, what's this crazy experience?" Blah blah. And basically, emotions are just God in it.
Well said. She has that moment when she gets destroyed by the high school girl Sasha, right? And then I don't have Sasha up there. And then she walks away and she cries, and she describes that as feeling achy, but also good.
She also cries before that, because when she's sitting in the town and she's looking at everyone.
Oh yes,
People are happy and she laughs.
that's right. Who are sad and are having an argument and right.
Well, and it starts back further than that when she loses her arches. She has to carry us to the doctor.
Yes. Anxiety becomes like this, and Anna's exactly right. The fear of death, the just fear itself, is oftentimes portrayed as being real. Like she says out loud in one moment, I have fear, and I'm not even sure what I'm afraid of. And another woman walks by and says, it's called anxiety. I have it all the time, and so that becomes what real is. Real becomes feelings. And I find that horribly lacking. But that's what it is. And the song at the end of the movie that Billie Eilish wrote for the movie is all about this. The song is called "What Was I Made For?" I used to float, now I just fall down. I used to know, but I'm not sure now. What was I made for? What was I made for? Taking a drive, I was an ideal. Looking so alive, turns out I'm not real. Just something you paid for. What was I made for? I don't know how to feel, but I want to try. I don't know how to feel, but someday I might. Someday I might. The whole point is what's real is knowing how to feel, is feelings. Now, this sets up a really terrible definition of what reality is, right? It's just our feelings. Well, gosh, I feel alone. I feel weak. I feel terrified. I feel not valued. I feel unloved. I feel all different things sometimes, right? Is that my reality? Is that the reality I'm supposed to walk in? Or am I supposed to walk in truth of who I am in Christ? That God loves me, that he laid down his life for me, that he laid down his only son's life for me, that he has an amazing hope for me in eternity, and that he's created some really good things that if we don't let the world strip them away from us, we can enjoy, like family life, like the cooperative, interdependent relationship of husband and wife, like a family and children that come from that, like living in community with others in a peaceable manner without always looking at each other through the lens of, do you have more power than I do? And should I do something to try to take that back? You know, think about this for a moment. The end of that movie, Barbie says to Ken, you need to go figure out who you are without me. You're not your girlfriend. You're not your mink. You're not your beach. Ken did need to figure out who he was without her. Sure. But he didn't have to figure out who he was without a relationship. Like he didn't have to figure out like who I am completely apart from this other individual that God created for me to relate with. You know what I'm saying? Like, imagine this for a moment. God creates Eve, brings her to Adam, and Adam says, thanks, Lord, but I need to figure out who I am without her. Can you imagine that for a minute? I mean, God, I mean, Adam of anybody has the best case to make. I've been alive for a couple of days. I really don't know who I am. I kind of just need some time to figure it out, you know? Like, Lord, I just need some time. I don't know me. I need to go do me. Or vice versa. God creates Eve, says, okay, Eve, bring you to this man. And she says, you know, he looks like a great guy, but I need to figure out who I am without him. Thanks, Lord. I just got to go do me for a while.
But their identity isn't wrapped up in each other. Their identity comes from the relationship with God.
Amen. The relationship with God. But without God, what are you left with? What? What do I want? What are my feelings? What are my desires? That makes me me. And that's the lie. Sorry, Meryl? Yes, relative truth. Anna.
I just wanted to say, like, I don't think feelings are what make us human. It's the feelings that aren't backed in truth.
Yes.
The issue.
Yes. Amen. Amen. Because oftentimes our feelings are backed in truth. Like a sense of security and peace in the truth of knowing the Lord. That's real. Sure, happiness in good things, and joy in taking joy in good things. Absolutely. It's just, without it being attached to truth, it can just be a never-ending ocean of waves tossing you to and fro, right? Right. Right. Well, apparently our sexual desires, perverse or otherwise, define who we are in today's world, right? This is who I am. No, it's not. That's the thing that I think the movie just really lacks. And what God has done is God created a complementary, non-power-oriented relationship, shared duties, shared service, shared selflessness, interdependence. And it's this wonderful, beautiful thing. And we just never get to see it in the movie. And I think that's the real heartbreak. And I think that's what that's why you walk away feeling so unsatisfied. I walk away feeling very unsatisfied at the end of the movie. But I hope, guys, what we walk away with is when we interact with the world around us and they start framing the conversation in terms of power dichotomies, power disparities, we have to change that conversation. We cannot let that be the way we frame the conversation. If we do, we're defeated from the outset. If all we can do is when we read the Bible is see a power disparity between men and women in God's society of Israel and lament that and oh yeah, that really wasn't good. Well, I think we've lost the argument. If we're not willing to argue for, now wait a minute. Let me leave you with this. Did the Levites get an inheritance in the land? Why not?
They're priests.
They were priests. They had a higher calling. What was their inheritance? Serving in the temple, yes. And in fact,
Yeah, they received the tithe.
they received the tithe. Yes, so they did not own land themselves. They received a tithe. And you know what God says about that? In Numbers chapter 18, the Lord spake unto Aaron, verse 20, Thou shalt have no inheritance in their land, neither shalt thou have any part among them. I am thy part and thine inheritance among the children of Israel. Power disparity or a higher calling? Maybe Ruth doesn't get to be a landowner, but maybe she has a higher calling. It all depends on how you look at it. Let's pray. Lord, thank you for this opportunity to look at these things. And though it's worldly content, worldly satire, and all the rest that's kind of prompted a conversation, Father, I pray that we've brought your perspective to it and that we understand what you have really done and that, Father, that we appreciate it. I thank you so much for what you have done, how you've created each of us, men and women, and the amazing thing that comes about when we live in your design and in your purpose. And Father, I've experienced it, and it's been the most amazing thing. And I'm thankful for that. And Lord, I just pray that, especially for some of the younger people, as they enter into adulthood, as they enter into this world that wants to tell them that they need to look at everything through a worldly lens, that they will cast that off, they will look at it through your lens, through what you designed this to be, and they will enjoy the benefit of that if they can find it with someone else who sees the same thing. We love you, Father, in Christ's name. Amen.